Come on, come on, come on, do something you wouldn't do.
So they're two space echoes that ended up on a lot of things, but it was this kind of cool situation where one of them was like the clean one and the other was the messed up, wobbly one that you basically couldn't get, like you couldn't make it clean. But using both together was often a really good combination. It's dropping out heaps and wobbling around the place, and
so that's on the whole vocal.
yeah, that's just quietly over the whole thing.
Welcome to Audio Technology Magazine's ISO Booth podcast, where we phone audio engineers and producers at home, and thanks to the pandemic lockdown, they answer.
Hey everyone, Chris here from Audio Technology Magazine. We've got a special AT ISO booth for you today. In the booth, we've got Husky and Gideon from the band Husky, along with producer-engineer Matt Redlich. Welcome, chaps.
Hey, how you going?
Nice to be here.
We're here to talk about the recording of the new Husky record, Stardust Blues, and what's more, we're going to take a walk through a ProTools session of the single SYWD. Really excited about this one. This is going to be great. So first up, if we back up a little bit, can we talk about some of the songwriting process, guys? This aspect I find almost impossibly bohemian. Tell us about the Westbury Hotel and its role in the writing of the album.
Well, actually, the writing began before the songs got to the Westbury Hotel.
Okay.
All the songs started out as instrumentals that I wrote with Gideon and our bass player and bandmate Jules Pascoe.
Mm-hmm.
And we wrote those in Jules's home studio, little room he's got in his house, and I then took all those instrumentals we wrote together, we recorded them, recorded demos of all of them, and I took all of those and wrote lyrics to them.
Okay.
And that's so I took those to where I was living, which was at the Westbury Hotel. And that's where the writing of the song, of the lyrics happened, and I guess the story of Stardust Blue was born.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to paint somewhat of a picture, it's like an old mansion, and it's kind of got a shared house / squat kind of vibe, where it's like this, mouldering magnificence, and unfortunately got committed and destroyed, didn't it? It got pulled down, and this is all kind of part of the story of the album and the production.
Yeah, I lived there for about 5 years with friends and other musicians and artists, and for the last months that it was still standing, Gideon and I lived there together. It's been knocked down now, and there's already only about towards the end of last year it was knocked down. There's already a big apartment block where it was standing. But yeah, it was a share house, but it was a kind of a hub for musicians and artists. We recorded there, we painted there, we had parties there. It was there was a kind of magic and mystery that I think everyone felt as soon as they walked in the door there. So it was an inspiring place.
Some of that is documented in the great YouTube video of the version of Dirty River, which you recorded, which kind of documented some of the time you had there, along with the part demolition and then post Westbury. It's fascinating to watch. Actually, it's a good document. So what did you use to get the ideas down at the Westbury Hotel?
What I used at the Westbury Hotel is not particularly interesting. I had a laptop and like an SM58 that was set up at my desk, and I was recording the lyrics and melodies into the sessions as I was writing them. But we had a nice setup at Jules's place. Jules is quite a gear nerd. He's got about 4 different tape machines, I think, these days. Gus, do you remember? Do you want to talk about Flaming Tone Studio?
Flaming Tone Studios in Flemington. Yeah, it's it's one of those kind of. I guess it becomes almost an iconic little 1-bedroom studio that is just covered with leads and guitars and old analog pedals of all descriptions. It's one of those studios where you enter at a certain time in the day and then you emerge perhaps 6, 7, 8 hours later, and it feels like only half an hour went by. But it was just a great space to get the creative mojo flowing. It's not a high-end professional studio, but there's so many toys and there's such a great feeling around the space that it was. It felt like the perfect place to begin the ideas for Stardust Blues. And all of the songs were, except for Hearse on a Highway, I think, all of the songs were either written or big chunks were put together in Flaming Tone Studios between the 3 of us, myself, Husk and Jules.
Yeah, right. So what are you doing there? I guess if you've kind of developed these instrumentals, is that part of the process that you're talking about now? Just getting my chronology right. Like, so you're in Jules' place, I guess, developing also the sounds and the tones and kind of the textures that you want to hear on the album. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, Go on.
I was just going to say yes, but it wasn't even an album yet. We hadn't set out to record an album. We had just really decided to get together regularly, about once a week, and just have fun, really, do some writing, play with the tape machines and the gear that Jules was kind of collecting as we went, and just go on a little journey together. And I think it was a good way to start without having any kind of goal or strategy in mind. Didn't really even know what was going to become of these little, instrumentals we were recording. But and I think that gave the whole process and even the later the sound of the album a bit of a kind of it gave us a kind of freedom. So I think you can hear that in the songs and the recordings.
And was that when you knew the tape was going to play a significant role, or did you know that earlier?
We were starting to get excited about tape, and because we were using these sort of old secondhand tape machines that Jules was finding on eBay and collecting. And we also we already knew that we loved the sound of tape. A lot of the records we love, both, from back in the day and also recent records. A lot of them are recorded to tape. And then we knew that we were going to be taking these demos to Matt to then record them properly. Well, once we decided that we had material for an album, we took them to Matt and started talking about tape, and when it comes to tape, Matt's the guy to talk to.
I
when it comes
can't
to
remember.
anything, Matt's the guy to talk to, but
Yeah,
tape
that's true.
in
Tape
particular.
especially. I can't remember the exact sequence of events, but one of our plans early on at one point, and interrupt me if I've got the sequencing wrong, but one of the plans was to drive Husky's van up to Brisbane, where he has a tape machine, and capture it and drive it back down to Melbourne so that we could capture these songs the way that we had wanted to on tape.
That plan still hasn't been fulfilled yet.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's Stardust Blues Part 2.
So I got to ask, this tape machine in Brisbane, is it sort of being held hostage, or what's the story?
It's just being held hostage by physics, just by the fact that it weighs 300 kilos, and it's quite delicate. And, it's the last substantial thing that I had brought down after I moved here. Everything else, crazily, almost everything else that I have has been able to fit in the old Virgin APRA baggage allowance over the last 4 years. And
Sure.
I don't know how I've squeezed my entire studio through this narrow letterbox kind of suitcase-sized hole, one bit at a time. And I look at things now and think how did I get that here? But yeah, I was in a band, playing in a band at the time, and obviously flying backwards and forwards a lot. So every single time I flew back to Brisbane, I would, put something else in a suitcase. But yeah, the tape machine you can't break it down
Didn't
to
fit in the suitcase.
size.
Yeah, okay.
It's at my parents, still in the basement, sort of in the corner with a towel over it.
All right, they're not using it as a drinks cabinet or something.
No, you never know what'll happen when I go back and see that they've moved it somewhere or yeah.
But now we're just waiting for them to open the border, and then we'll take the van up and grab it, bring it home, record the next album.
First post-pandemic trip.
So with I guess my original question was trying to get you guys to use the words Tascam 388, but clearly I'm going to have to be a little more specific with the question. But so I was fascinated that was big part of your I guess demoing process. Is that right, or did it get used higher up the food chain?
The Tascam actually we stumbled upon. I think after the record was finished. We were experimenting with other tape machines before that. The Tascam, from memory, Matt came across the Tascam online. Someone had put something up about the 388, and
actually, the way it went was we were outside Matt's mixing Matt's studio
in Abbotsford.
In Abbotsford, where Matt mixed the record. Yeah. And it was towards the end of the mixing. We were standing outside. I think we'd just finished a session, and we were talking about the Tascam 388. We were talking about Sam Evian and some other musicians who have used the Tascam 388, and we were saying we've got to get one. And Matt was saying, they're pretty impossible to find. You don't come by them, especially in Australia. And then the next night at midnight, we got a Facebook message from Matt saying there's a Tascam 388 for sale.
It's like
20 minutes.
And I from a guy that I knew who has a studio there, and it was mint condition, and we went and had a look at it, and it was weird showroom, sort of it had been sitting in someone's, someone who would put a sheet over it every day since 1982 or whatever. Could not our luck. And then,
can you describe the 388 for those listening, Matt?
Well, it's an amazing piece of engineering. It's an 8-track 1/4-inch tape machine with an 8-channel mixer, with mic pre's and EQs, and then an 8-channel monitor mixer built into the one kind of unit. And it's kind of like one of those dream bits of gear that you would think about, why doesn't it, when Homer makes a car on The Simpsons and it has and it's totally impractical. It's got like a separate bubble for the kids in the back, and like it bankrupted the company that made it. But the 388 is a little bit like that in the studio sense, in that it's like a self-contained, amazing thing that has really any sensible company would make it modular and Tascam did actually do that. They had the tape machine part and the desk part, and they also just for one brief shining moment put it all into one box, and it just sounds fantastic. And you can make it sound really tapey and lo-fi, but you can also make it sound remarkably hi-fi, but in a nice kind of way. And you can hear in the different live videos that we did after the album, they were all recorded on the 388. You can hear various versions of that. Like Dirty River is in its much more dirty and sort of coloured kind of form, and I think Paper Mache Eyes is probably one of the cleanest kind of sounding kind of versions of it. But just an extraordinary thing. We've since we used it for all of those live versions, and we've also been recording with it since at Husky's place down south there. And it's just like, I just want to meet the engineer who designed it and just shake his hand and say thank you for putting this thing into the world, doing such a great job.
That's great.
Go and buy one because they're shit. So just
yeah. So needless to say, after those messages went around at midnight on that evening, we had it in the boot of our car. I think less than 12 hours later. So yeah, we snapped it up real quick.
That's really interesting. It's a fascinating looking beast. It's like sort of one man's kind of vision for the project studio, the home studio back in the early mid 80s. Yeah, really cool. Should we get stuck into our crazy idea and have a look at a session on Pro Tools and start chatting about it?
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's do it.
I'll just change the view here. In some ways, I think, Matt, I'm kind of at your kind of whim here about how to best walk us through the SYWD session. Probably the only question without notice I'd have for you, and don't feel like you have to scramble to answer this, but do you have like a Pro Tools template that you would normally kind of start with for a Husky session?
Not well. I mean, the way we did, we did this album. We recorded on 24-track tape, and it lives entirely on tape until right at the end of the Woodstock sessions. But we were actually using Pro Tools to monitor the tape, which is kind of quite a cool way to do it, because you've then got a savable monitor mix kind of template that you're running the tape machine through. So you can you load the tape up, and you can essentially, you've got like a digital mixer that has all the settings and pans and basic kind of stuff you're monitoring through. So, I would have done that for sure, like loaded up the previous session and then modified it from there. And that made that part of the process. Previously, all the stuff I'd done on tape back in Brisbane, I was monitoring through the console. So you have to bring up the analog console mix again every time, and you don't always get it exactly the same. But you deal with it. So that's the only template.
Gotcha.
in the time of recording.
Okay. So what are we looking at? It looks quite a bit more than 24 tracks. So is it the tape? Is the 24 tracks from the tape plus sort of strings and orchestral, or there's a lot more overdubs as well? Like, do you want to just tell me about the setup here?
Yeah, like it when you scroll like this, it looks more than 24 tracks, but there's a couple of guitar overdubs, not very many. Like there's just a sort of a couple here that weren't on tape. I can tell because I can see the input is a non-tape input, so there's 3 guitar overdubs here. I'm pretty sure all the backing vocals, or nearly all of them, were done on tape as well, and then the strings, of course, and the clarinet. So from here down, like you just scroll all the way, and there's a bunch of string overdubs, and they're all on the computer. But yeah, it's actually not much more than 24 tracks, and if you sort of bounce if you did it in the old school way and bounce the strings and all those multiple doubles and triples and octuples down to 2 tracks, it's actually a fairly simple session and arrangement, really. So, kind of analog, kind of old school in that way as well. And the tones are mostly more or less what was recorded on the tape. There's not a great deal of kind of crazy mixing going on at all, really. And so there's a lot of tracks that don't have a single plug-in on them. So I guess the main thing is that early on, or before recording, we decided to do it on tape and to do it live as much as possible with the 4 players in the room all playing together, and even if it was possible for Gus to play multiple keyboard parts at the same time, or like to have several keys set up, we would try to do that, and if it was possible to have even I think in some cases several guitars or guitar sounds happening that were committed to the tape during the take. The idea was at the end of when we had a take that we were happy with, we wanted it to sound like you could basically put a vocal on it and release it. We want it to sound musically satisfying. And it was a really good way to work, because you kind of know that if something isn't feeling right, you've got to do something about it right then. You can't just defer it, which is just the way that everything is these days, and the way that you naturally kind of default as a human. You want to kind of hedge your bets and like keep it safe and put it off until later. And when you're working in the way that we worked, putting with the rules that we sort of established, you just can't do that. So you have to get the vibe right then. If this overdub isn't working, you've got to try something else. If you can't play it, you've got to figure out how to play it. Right, you can't be editing stuff together. So, yeah, we've got a band, a drum kit, a bass guitar, an acoustic piano, and an electric guitar. And you can sort of hear, like, if I solo the piano track, which has the most bleed in it. You can hear that kind of bleed that turns to lovely glue when you add that to a mix. If you take it out, apart from the piano disappearing, obviously, if you take that out, everything just gets a little bit less interesting sounding and sort of thinner.
Okay, so do you want to that's interesting. Do you want to expand on that a little bit about the use of bleed in the recording, just to what role it played?
Yeah, I mean, I know we sort of experimented a little bit with different levels of isolation early on in the session, and we definitely noticed that. I think there might have even been some bits of talk of like doing the piano as an overdub on some takes and doing it later, because it had the most amount of bleed, and we were even hearing like noise from the tape machine, like actual acoustic noise from the tape machine and the piano mics at a small amount. But every time you take, I think we record some and not have that room bleed, and it just didn't sound as good. And so I think I vaguely remember on a few occasions saying like we could do that, but like we won't have everyone together, and we won't have that same glue. So we should try to do it all together. If there was a question of something being difficult to should this Rhodes part be the main part, or should the acoustic piano part be the main part, or whatever? It's like, let's have the mics that are picking up the band.
I could add to that as well that there was such a lovely chemistry and such a lovely feeling amongst the band and between the musicians that at the time, I guess we weren't really willing to compromise on that. We wanted to make sure that we were playing together, capturing everything as live as we possibly could. And in the end, a lot of the kind of technical issues that presented, that they ended up being things that really added to the recordings in the end.
Yeah, it's
Good.
Yeah.
Yep. Did it inform any of your mic choices, Matt, or do you want to talk about that?
I mean, the main thing, it definitely did. Actually, funnily enough, with the piano, the first mic we put up was an AEA R88, which is a real tongue twister of a mic to say, which is a one-line ribbon. So obviously it's picking up as much from the back as it is from the front. And that mic sounds amazing on piano, and it's just sounded incredible. But the problem was we had just even less isolation then, and even fewer kind of options. You definitely, obviously, like bleed is good, but you don't want to just totally box yourself into a corner. And you always, I feel like with stuff like bleed and noise and things like that in a recording, you always want to sort of allow like for it to increase by like 30 or 50% in the final product because of compression and everything. Like all that stuff never gets less; it always gets more. So. So we ended up going with Neumann KM56s in cardioid, very, very close to the strings, and that still picks up a fair bit of the room, but it was less than the R88. And we had the doors closed. We had amps in booths and drums in a booth, and the doors closed, but still had to pay attention to the volume of amps and just a balance in the room. And it's the old thing, if it doesn't sound good in the room, it's very unlikely to sound good in the recording, certainly, balance-wise. So had to pay attention to that stuff. Yeah.
What about drums?
Drums, so they're in a booth. So the setup was, I guess the interesting part of the drum setup, we had fairly reasonably standard mics on the close drums, AKG 30 on the kick, 57 on the snare, had an RCA 77 over kind of the middle of the kit, had U47 and U48 as overheads, which felt quite luxurious and nice. And then, but probably the most interesting part of the drum sound is this mic called Big Kit, which I'll just talk a little bit here because it's super loud in this mix. But and what that is actually another kick mic, another snare mic, and another kind of kit mic set up as well, running into their own mic pre's and EQs, and then running into this Altec valve mixer that is at Woodstock. And actually, like, because of that kind of silly gain structure of running a mic pre essentially into a mic level input, it was dirty. It was like at 1, it was already, and at 2, it was like crazy, and at 5, it was like, death, basically. So it had this really distorted kind of lo-fi version of the drum kit, and that was also then. So I've got, where do I write here? It's going into all that, and then through a pull tech and into an AWA valve compressor they have there, which is amazing as well. But that signal is sort of just like the vibe signal, just kind of the air and the dirt and the like the and often I actually wondered if I thought I could use it just on its own, or I don't think we ever did on any song. But if I'll play the drums. I'll play the drums with it. Hang on a sec. I'll play the drums with it, and then turn it off, and you'll hear what it does his song, even at its relatively low level, is still contributing quite a lot. So.
Mm.
And then without, dear me, sorry. Then without. Then. So that just turned out to be an invaluable thing, which I hadn't. I've done versions of that before, a bit more with like a single mic. That's the dirty mic, which is a really common thing to do. But I don't think I've ever set up a whole separate drum mix, on its own that could essentially be a whole other signal, a whole other drum kit, and use it like that. So that was a lot of fun. And
so just so now that I'm paying attention now, I'm just joking. But so what went into this Altec mixer? Like which sources precisely? Sorry.
Okay, so there was a D12, an AKG D12 on the bass drum, and a 421 on the snare, and then there was actually a reverse headphone, a Sennheiser HG25, like half of a headphone that was sitting. I'm pretty sure it was like I just taped it on top of the kick drum, and that was going through an undertone channel and had a heap of EQ on it, but that was like extremely distorted, that channel. And it was one of those things where I sort of set it up and it was like all wrong, but it sounded great, and so I left it. And that's just in there as this like tiny, just barely above zero, because it's extremely distorted sort of tone. So that's most of the distortion that you can hear in the in that signal. And you have to play around with phase and with not so much phase, but actually like EQ, the phase roll that happens when you EQ to try to get the phase of the various drums in with the close drums, and I had to definitely play around with that a bit. But that was a cool thing. It's something I've done a lot since then. Is have that separate. If you have the gear to do it, it's a lot of fun.
And this was used throughout, was this sort of consistently used throughout every song that you recorded at Woodstock? Is that true?
Yeah. Once I think I set it up on the first day. No, I'm pretty sure we had it right from the start, and it got used significantly in every song after that. So sometimes nearly on it, actually.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Sorry, did I interrupt you, Gideon? Or
I think I was just going to ask Matt about the outro drums. Did we change the setup for those to that bouncier groove?
So the big kit mic change. There's some automation on it. You can see here. There's a big bass boost that comes in, and then at the same time, there's this drum overdub that we did, which I think we may have done with that same signal path, which is processed more extremely, like after we got the take and we came back and added this. So
yeah. Yeah.
And then there's a little space echo, I think, that I added here. And that was something that was just literally from the demo, that idea, and we just tried to recreate it. It's something they did at Jules's place. It was awesome. This like really kind of fat hip hoppy sounding kid that came in. It was like one of the many brilliant parts of the demos. So
that's really, really cool. So just to backtrack maybe slightly, Husky, when you go into the studio, I'm interested in your opinion on this, is like when you decide and making decisions about the sound, how much is up for grabs with Matt, and how much do you kind of quarantine off and say, well, this aspect of our sound is sacrosanct, we don't touch this aspect, as it were, but this aspect is up for grabs?
Well, on this record, we recorded Punch Buzz, our last record, with Matt as well, and we've done a lot of work together now over the last few years. So going into the studio for Stardust Blues, nothing was really sacrosanct. I trust Matt fully. If there was, I basically hand all the kind of sound, even the creative sort of sonic decisions over to Matt once we're in the studio. I mean, we had those blueprints, those demos, so there was a fair bit of information and detail in those, but none of it was sacrosanct. And I hand that kind of responsibility over to Matt to steer the sonic ship. And if there's ever anything that that strikes me as not right, or which is quite rare when it comes to decisions that Matt makes, I'll obviously speak up, and we talk about it and work it out, and we always find a middle ground pretty easily. And I think that goes for all of us.
Yeah.
But
it was very
it's
rare we would actually disagree on something, and it'd have to be like, well, it's down to your opinion or my opinion. Like that may never have happened actually, possibly throughout the entire. Like I think, maybe once or twice, but like you pretty well always end up seeing one person will see the other person's aesthetic and go like, I agree, no, that's the right way to go.
I think the only I was just going to say the only. I'll just say,
please,
quickly,
I insist.
The only time I remember it happening is a kind of taste decision about a vocal that I've sung, and it's something in the quality of the vocal that is perhaps unusual or even a mistake that Matt really likes. And I can't
live with it.
Yeah, even that doesn't happen often. Like often I will not like something, and Matt will convince me that it's great and that we really shouldn't get rid of it. And especially working on tape, these decisions had to be made as we went. In the past, working on Pro Tools, you can record. Generally, we would record 10 vocals and perhaps comp it together or piece it together in parts. Working on tape, it was whole vocals, and either we got to the end of the vocal and it was the one, or we rewound and recorded over it. So it really forces you to decide what you think and work out what you really think, which is good for me. And we had to make those decisions on the fly, and even those, most of the time, Matt's able to convince me because I trust him, which is so important.
Yeah, I think that we really believed in and worked with a kind of guiding principle that the best ideas and the sounds and things that excited us the most were going to be the things that ultimately prevailed. And it never felt like this kind of exercise in people trying to protect their own ideas just by virtue of the fact that they had brought those ideas to the table. I think anyone who's worked in any kind of creative collaboration knows that kind of thing that you can slip into where, you just think it's the best idea because it was your own. And I really don't think we fell into that trap at all on this project. And I think if you're going to collaborate with people, then you have to do it in a trusting way. And to me, I never questioned that with this process.
It's good.
We all there was an openness to our attitude, which was intentional. We sort of went in talking about being open, and it stops you from being so focused on what you're trying to achieve that you miss these spontaneous magical moments, you know, because they're not exactly what you were going for. And we wanted to be sure that we didn't miss any of those moments. And Matt's great at identifying those moments because you know, you're in your little world trying to get the part right. And if you don't get it exactly as you were trying to get it, you miss this other thing that happened that was great, you know. And Matt was there to always be, you know, to make sure we didn't miss those moments.
Yeah, I think, you know, I felt like I had to be, not had to be, but I wanted to be zoomed out a lot as much as possible. And also having the band playing all together kind of helps you do that, because it's next to impossible. I mean, it literally is impossible to listen to every part as it's happening individually. So you're forced to have like an overall sense of the feeling of it, rather than like, oh, there was a little fudge on that note there. And then, you know, the great thing is you know that if there is a little fudge on the guitar and that you would really rather that wasn't there, it's going to go into a computer later and you can do amazing, crazy magic if you really need to. So you've got the best of all worlds, because you've got the little safety valve right at the end, but you don't have the ability to reach out and grab that safety valve like the whole time, you know.
But from memory, unless you were hiding it from us, Matt, there wasn't a lot of editing done later on the computer. And in fact, sometimes when we wanted to edit things, you wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
Disallowed.
Yeah,
there were long conversations about simple bass notes, you know.
Right, yeah, that's right, yeah.
You know, one bass note.
Or the right, wrong bass note,
yeah. And we were always, you especially, but we were hesitant to change anything, you know, because we wanted to have that feeling of being real and in the moment, and every tiny little, you know, thing you take away from that, every even if it's small, by increments, it gets less and less human, you know.
It's dead by 1,000 cuts, and that's like, music is full of that these days. I hate to sound like that, but that's what I think. And it's not that that's not valid as well, but it's refreshing to be in an organic way from time to time as a producer. It's like, the whole world is just so inorganic now, and it just feels to dive into the ocean.
Can we get back to the session?
Sure.
I guess, like, what do you want to nominate? Should we have a look at vocals?
Sure. Just trying to think. There's, I mean, the lead vocal was all. It's not comped in the computer at all. It's all from it's all from 2 tracks of tape. I think we ended up having two lead vocal tracks. Like, we had enough tracks to have one, you know, have like another take basically. And so it looks like we've used one from, or the intro from, or the first verse rather, from the first, and then the rest from the next one. But signal path-wise, it was the U47, my U47 into the Neve console there, which is this, you know, the ultimate vintage Neve that everyone kind of dreams of, with 1066s actually, not 1073s, but 1073 with one less frequency in the mid range, and into an On Fairchild, and that was the vocal chain for like most of the record. And most of the overdubs. We got to do a rather luxurious lineup of vocal mics when we started overdubbing. And so we had the House U48, we had my U47, we had the House 67, the RCA 77, and the Sony C37A.
Is that the little nugget?
That's not the Nugget. No, that,
because we used the Nugget on a couple of songs, on My Darling Ghost, I think, and
Yeah, we used a Reslo ribbon mic in the end for a couple of other songs, but that was the only other vocal mic that we ended up ever preferring over the 47. So
So that's extreme vindication for Matt. It's like, that's my mic. And
it was nice. It was nice and kind of odd to have it win over all of those other, another $70,000-$80,000 worth of microphones.
It was stiff competition.
Yeah, it's like winning a beauty contest at Donald Trump's Miss World.
Yeah, it's being awarded second.
That's good.
Yeah, and then it was just trying to. They were pretty well all very early takes. It was pretty rare that we got, it was really just like set up the good gear that sounds good and then try to keep the vibe as good as possible, and not get buried in the weeds. Be sensitive to the way that Husky sings and performs and is in the world, and that was like my primary focus for it, and knowing that like sonically, as long as it wasn't distorting in the wrong place or whatever, it was going to be totally fine. Like if with a signal path like that, and then if you just get the vibe right, you're going to be fine, sort of thing. So yeah, a lot of pretty early takes. One or two songs on the record were actually like a first take. I think I wanted to keep a kind of a feeling of lightness and of focus, but not seriousness. Of kind of like just a stillness, and we had some candles going, and we actually burnt a lot of this kind of fragrant. There was kind of a theme of burning this fragrant wood that you guys had in the studio. The record actually is like not something I would normally do, but it was really created. Like if you have a smell that's associated with
it looks a little bit like this.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Get a closer look at that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Light it up, guys. We should have really lit it up.
We probably should have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna. I'll be back in a moment.
Kind of. It sort of
created,
sort of mythology and vibe. And sort of it became this other character in the record, this Alejandro character. Just helped you to know where you are, where you were, and what you were supposed to be doing by having this thing. So
as soon as you smell that, you know you're in the right place, and you know what what you're aiming for.
It's the spirit of Stardust Blues.
Yeah, you're in the Stardust Blues world.
It's kind of like the ultimate plug-in. And pity we can't do like a compare before and after vocal with and without.
Right. You could hear the difference, guaranteed.
You definitely smell the difference.
100%. Yeah, so that was sleep. And then, also we actually went back a day after we tracked the whole record, and I'd even done some mixing. We went back and did a day of just printing analog effects from the studio, and so I have on the vocal.
Let it go now, let it go now, let it go. Come on, come on, come on, do something you wouldn't do.
So there are two space echoes that ended up on a lot of things, but it was this kind of cool situation where one of them was like the clean one, and the other was the messed up, wobbly one that you basically couldn't get, like you couldn't make it clean. But using both together was often a really good combination. It's dropping out heaps and wobbling around the place, and
so that's on the whole vocal.
Yeah, that's just quietly over the whole thing. Yeah. Just providing this sort of space kind of.
I slip out the back door. I don't need no grand farewells and goodbyes. I creep into the sunlight, past Buck throwing up on the rose bush outside again. It's only midday. I got no where
So it's
to
a
go.
classic thing of like you can't really even hear it in a lot of parts of the song, but if you take it away, you lose something. And it seems that a lot of what I do is trying to find things like that just sit in there, and they're not super intrusive, but they make it sound more magical and bigger.
What about my favorite toy, Matt? Is that on the vocal?
That actually isn't on this song at all.
Really? So, I'm surprised I let you not use it.
Yeah. Husky's talking about the EMT plate reverb that I have at my studio, and we did end up using it on a lot of songs, but this one just didn't need, especially with that Space Echo track the way it was, it's kind of a reverby sound anyway, and I guess that's why we didn't really seem to need it.
So how did you achieve the messed up Space Echo sound?
That's just literally what it was doing. Like the one on the left is the clean one, so it sounds like this. And the one on the right is the messed up one. It's just because the tape path is not it's not pulling the tape onto the heads in a kind of reliable way, and it was sometimes sticking and stopping, and sometimes too loose, and so it's dropping out and fluttering and stuff. So, but it just does that. Does that magical tape thing that even when it's wrong, it's really right. So,
yeah, it's really cool. Trouble with I guess stuff like that is that you listen to it and you can hear really cool bits, and you're sort of wishing it would mess up in a certain way that you can never predict. So unpredictable, but
you just have to let it. You have to let it be unpredictable. As soon as you try to make it do what you want it to do, it won't react properly. But if you let it, if you just let it be.
Yep.
And so if it's we came to that one in particular, it's like if it was doing something cool in a certain way, it was like we got to do this, and we got to record this. I think even during the sessions, I put down a couple of it was doing it was particularly cool, and so I just recorded it in just in case. So it's again like a good exercise in just reacting to the moment and not trying to have too much control.
So did you record that to tape, or did you record that you recorded it some other way, or was that printed on tape with everything else?
That was all these effects that we went back and did this day right at the end. So everything had been tidied up and mixed to some degree, and comping needed to happen, and then we went in and just did this and in fact I've got here, I'll just try and bring it up, but we also used we wired up the 24-track tape machine as a tape echo as well, and use that on some songs, but it didn't make the cut on this one, obviously. But sounds like, that's actually okay. So that was a slap. The tape, that was a 24-track machine as a slap echo, but then going into a Leslie speaker as well, and that was a bit too much. That was actually something that I kind of think as well. I don't think it's working for this one. And I was like, I'll trust your vibe on that. But
through the holograms of sunlight, half in a dream, half mid-air. I know I can make it.
So we did all sorts of stuff like that to try, and that did actually make it onto some songs as well, but not on this one. So,
do you have to sounds like you didn't have to go crazy with compression on Husky's vocal?
Well, I wouldn't say crazy, but you can see the waveform is pretty you probably know what waveforms look like when you record the tape. You can sort of see all these waveforms. They don't have any drastic peaks in them. They all come up to a certain point and stop, and that's the tape, the natural sort of tape compression that sounds transparent anyway. But actually, the Unfair Child was probably grabbing it quite a lot, and that was that was something that it definitely sounds good, but I've got an LA2A on it here too, so it's compressing it more anyway. So obviously, I wanted more, but it definitely was, it was grabbing on, for sure. Like, Fairchild is a pretty grabby sounding, pretty grabby compressor, even as transparent as it is.
And what would you kind of attribute your success in being able to bed the vocal into the mix so well? Is that the compression that you're using? Like, what are the main factors for being able to successfully do that?
I think in this one it wasn't very difficult. The only kind of trick that I have going on is just a bit of parallel compression in the chorus, because the band comes right up and it gets a lot busier. And in the second chorus, there's strings and clarinets and stuff which are all competing. And Husky, this happens to be also a chorus that Husky is singing very quietly, almost kind of whispering. So naturally, someone who's whispering their voice, doesn't. It's going to need a little bit of help to cut through a dense mix. So you can hear like there's this parallel compression going on, which, let's see here, like a pre-fader. It's actually like dirt, it's a devil lock. But that's like if I play the whole thing, I'll play the whole thing without the parallel compressor. And then with. Just a little bit of like mid-range cut that kind of happens with sounding, still sounds relaxed. And for me, I felt like the vocal in the chorus in this song shouldn't necessarily be super loud. It's sort of like a bit of a mantra. Like, it's almost like the whole song is this like repetitive mantra at that point, and it sort of felt like it should be part of the mix rather than sitting right on top. But obviously you still need to hear the lyrics, because the lyrics are really important. So that was just what that was trying to do, and you can see it comes right up here in the next section when the strings really take off. Like the roller chain comes up and the filtering of the high end goes down to nothing there, so it gets brighter again because it has to cut over the string. So I might just play that. So yeah, but tape makes all this stuff like way easier. Like, vocals on tape, they just work. Like, you can just kind of put them where you want them to be. You don't have to have 10 plugins and then another 10 plugins in parallel. And the same with drums. Like, the drums as a bus there's no drum bus. They're not even going through any kind of master processing. They're just splitting out into the passive mixer, and that's it. There's a few plugins on each track, like a couple little nip tuck sort of, EQs and things, but there's nothing like that's really fixing anything or like providing much character. And that's tape. That's what tape does.
Sounds like you'll be using tape again in future. Tape is your friend.
Yeah, I think we're hooked.
Yeah, just need to bust into Palaszczuk's state and make it happen.
Yeah,
that's right.
Oh, yeah.
So hey, I'm aware that we don't have all the time in the world, but is it possible to just talk us through a little bit about the strings and I guess how you managed to wrangle all the string sounds?
Yes. So I guess there is a small string / orchestral arrangement happening in this song. We wrote the parts at the hotel, at the Westbury Hotel. They were written. The three of us, myself, Husk, and Jules, at least in the beginning and the early phases of the arrangement, they were written just on my keyboard, sitting around in a lounge room. And then we took those parts that we had written and we went back into Matt's studio and had a violinist and a clarinetist who also plays bass clarinet and a range of woodwind instruments. And she put down a few different layers of woodwind. And Jules had written this great part that you can hear. It just kind of creeps in the second chorus. This very quirky bass clarinet line that I don't know. I have no idea how he came up with it, but it's one of my favorite parts of the record. Have you got it there, Matt?
Yeah. Should I play it with the strings or without the strings?
Oh,
First
play
do
it.
that. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Without, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just. Oh. And it just repeated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
it's this beautiful, quirky line that ended up becoming this really great bridging line before going into the next section of the string / orchestral arrangement, and it leads really nicely into the next bit that when the strings open out and it goes into the that section there. Yeah, it's great. I can't remember if Jules wrote it on the spot or in those early writing sessions when we were doing the arrangement. But yeah, it's a real winner, that one.
Yeah, no, it's a real credit to you guys in the song because way too often you have the string section and it's you can kind of just almost see it coming on the horizon, and it's like there it is, the pop strings. And it's like so predictable, but there's something really kind of, these strings take it to a different level, and having a bass clarinet is always a quick and easy way of doing something that's straight out of the less ordinary, isn't it? It's amazing. Yeah, sure. It's a really good sound. Yeah. And I guess the other thing that when you go to all the trouble of doing strings and arranging it and recording it, there must be a bit of a sense of, hey, we've got to make the most of this, or how are those conversations, like how prominent the strings needed to be or were going to be?
I think with this one it was pretty self-evident strings-wise that they should be significant. There's room for them in the chorus as well. I think it's not like they sort of come in. They come in the first time, but they come in a big way the second time. There's room for them because you've heard a chorus already, so you sort of know what's happening, and then you get this giant, beautiful, lush outfit just draped over your shoulders, and a strange kind of pokey character kind of like waltzing in into the scene as well.
Matt, you play the strings with the clarinet, just the strings and the clarinet solid, and then maybe play it with the song.
Sure. And with the track.
Give it up now, give it up now, give it up. Let it go now, let it go now, let it go. Come on, come on, come on, do something you wouldn't do. Give it up now, give it up now, give it up. Let it go now, let it go now.
The thing is that the strings and the clarinet, they just say a lot there, you know, like they need to take over the vocal and the lyrics because they kind of say more than the lyrics at that point for me.
Yeah. No, it's lovely. It's transcendent. It's really, really good moment. And is there anything from your perspective, Matt, about strings and like, did you have any inspiration about, hey, if I could sort of make the strings sound a little like ... that'd be awesome? Or?
Well, I'm always wanting them to sound like Serge Gainsbourg, and that kind of. I think if and when I finally achieve something like that, then I'll move on to ripping something else off. But yeah, it's pretty hard to beat that. I mean, I guess one of the things about all the strings on this record is that they were all done in the overdub way with just a single player. And to be honest, I didn't expect that we'd get such a good result out of doing it like that. But no, and it was an education for me in what you can get with a single player. It's never going to be the same as a whole ensemble. But in some situations, it could. I now believe it could actually be better. And you can certainly do things. You can get a sound that way that you can't get with a big ensemble. So there was a lot of sort of, like you could say, sort of cheating, and this is a whole part of where are we, of violins that we just did extra takes and pitched them down several octaves, and I could not believe how much like a cello or like a double bass that actually sounds, and that's just a violin with the same mic in the same position, with a sound shifter just pitched down several times. And I'm like, wow, I'll take that for free then. Sorry, lots of double basses.
Yeah, double basses. Sorry to tell you, you're just a big violin.
Yeah, I think is it because you sort of like, if you can get those notes even in the first place, and then you pitch them down, and you don't have problems as with small rooms where the lower notes become extremely uneven. So in some ways you're even in a better position doing it like that. Anyway, there's obviously many ways to do it. That's what we had to work with. So yeah, and that was the strings were all just an Bayer M130 ribbon mic into the BAE 1023 like Neve style pre, and that was a great sound. I tried the U47. I tried I think maybe another condenser as well, and the ribbon mic just absolutely blew them away. It was so much better. That was a surprise. So yeah, it's become my go-to since then for these kinds of things.
Yeah, cool. Hey, fellas, I think as much as I'd like to just keep chatting, probably for your own sanity, let you go. But it's been really such a cool experience just to be able to, leisurely walk through your Pro Tools session and solo instruments and hear what you're doing. And I really hope we get a chance to do it again someday.
Oh yeah,
same
thanks
here.
so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, it was so great. Yeah, I mean, we could do this. We could do this all day, but I suppose for the sake of our viewers, we should should probably wrap it up. But yeah, that was great.
We'll put a call out on YouTube and see if anybody gets all the way to the end. If they do, I don't know. They might be able to win some fragrant wood they can burn or something. I don't know.
That's right. Type under in the comments, okay?
Okay. Thanks again, guys, and good luck with the album, and hopefully you get to tour it before too long.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Yeah, thanks.